to answer some of our questions. So far we've only really mentioned two statements of Chazal. Right, the first was a Gemara in Shabbos that says anyone who says that the David sinned is making a big mistake. What does that mean? Didn't he sin? He got punished. His son died. It was a civil war. His daughter got raped. His son got killed. His son got killed. The horrific consequences. It must have been something wrong, right? So we said the point it's trying to say is that it's not the way you see it. And the first point to understand that is based on the idea of the Gemara in Shmuel that says that David's army, it was the custom to give a bill of divorce before you left.
Yeah.
Okay? And it's possible this wasn't public knowledge, and I don't know, right? I don't know how well it was introduced, it seems, by David's father, called Yishai, that was their own personal thing, that he suggested that his sons should do this, his married sons should do this, in order not to give their wives the awful situation of not knowing where the husbands were, right? And David introduced it into his army. Okay, that was point number one. So that already puts a whole new picture on the whole story. It means, look, it wasn't nice what he did, but it certainly, it doesn't explain why he gave in to his desire for this woman, okay? But it does explain the basic halachic problem of how he could marry her afterwards. Well, if she wasn't married at the time, then it's not a problem, right? It may not be nice, and he got punished for what he did, and he gave him a bad name, and he created a big Chilul Hashem, but he did technically violate any prohibition, certainly not a biblical prohibition, right? Or even if it was a biblical prohibition of sleeping with a non-married woman, but it wasn't adultery, and therefore he was technically allowed to marry her, and therefore the prophet couldn't come along and say, David, you've got to divorce her, because I don't have to, right? So it was a what's the opposite of illicit? Licit?
Yeah, legit.
Legitimate, right. It was a legitimate wedding, and therefore there's no problem with the son being legitimate son and being the one who's going to build the Beis HaMikdash. It takes away that whole school of problems. Okay. The next point to consider is the murder of Uriah. So we've already said that it's not as bad as it looks because there are casualties in battle. Someone has to do the dangerous raids and attacks, and why shouldn't it be Uriah, who is very convenient for? He should be the one to do it. Again, it doesn't sound so morally clean, but there's a big difference between being a murderer and doing something which is not morally clean. But it does look like from the story that David actually wanted him killed even on a non-dangerous raid, because it said that leave Uriah on his own and the others will withdraw, implying that they're doing something which is unnecessary. Like, you don't raid with one guy, right? So, even though it didn't work out like that, so that we have to explain. So as I'll say, and we already pointed it out, that Uriah was terribly insubordinate. He refused to go home when David told him. He spurned the present that David sent him with the food. Then David repeated and told him to go home, and then he swore that he wouldn't go home. And at time and time again, he disobeys orders of the king. Now, in most societies, that would get you guillotined or beheaded or hanged or whatever you get for being insubordinate. So it's not like David doesn't have the right to kill him, right? Again, in the story, it's not so, it's just highly convenient for David to view this as insubordination, but it's not. The king certainly has the legal right to do this. Again, that's another point which the Gemara considers, that it's not real adultery, it's not really murder either. Even though it's intention that he should be put into a more dangerous place than necessary and put in more danger, as long as he doesn't endanger anybody else, is actually within David's legal right as king. Not can the king do whatever he wants, but this guy had seriously disobeyed orders. Okay?
So David's response was actually quite nice. Soft, nice.
It was accepted. Why nice?
Because in any other kingdom he would have gotten killed, but
he didn't get killed.
Yeah, but David didn't he didn't kill.
He did. David could have just said, "Okay, take this guy out and hang him." Right?
Yeah, he didn't say that, but he said okay, put him into.
Well, let enemies kill. Let God decide.
Yeah.
In a way, right? Because if we've
it's
seen this before.
right.
Right. Okay. All right, but there's other points to consider as follows. One is, if you have a, we don't have a Tehillim here. Okay, this is a Tehillim, I think it's Tehillim 26. Probably have a Siddur here, there's a Siddur there. Probably has Tehillim at the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's Tehillim at the back of that.
963.
In the women's Siddur it's the same.
No, I'm just guessing. Let's see.
Let's see, 900, no, say
Earlier.
women don't say, this is a women's Siddur.
No, it's because I know there's definitely Tillim in 975 and 927. But we do it every morning.
Ah, you're doing 26?
Yeah, 963.
928. Okay, look at this. Le David. This is a psalm to King David. Shafteni Hashem. Judge me, O God. Ki ani besumi halachti. Because I went in my simplicity. Meaning, the way which I went, I wasn't evil, I wasn't wicked, I was straightforward. B'Hashem batachti. I have trusted in God. Loi emod. I will not slip. Okay, so David thinks he's gone in a perfect way, great way, and therefore, I don't know, he's saying to God, you can judge me if you want, like, I've done everything right. Isn't that what he's saying? Something like that. Okay. Then it says, Bechoneni Hashem. Good afternoon, Aaron, right?
Yes.
Aaron, good, welcome. Okay.
Just use my Hebrew name.
Ah, okay.
Got it. Okay. It's not huge. We've got Daniel and Daniel. Bechoneni Hashem. Bechoneni from the word like Bechina. Bechina is a test. Test me. V'naseini, which is another word for test. Like Abraham's 10 tests are called Nisa, Nisyonot, tests. David is asking God to test him. Sorfa chil yosai. That means to cleanse out my kidneys. I need that. Velibi, and my heart. What it really means, it really means to test my heart. Now, in Western culture, we associate heart as the seat of emotion. Whether it is or isn't, I have no idea. But in Western culture, sees love and kindness and gentleness associated with the heart. We're going to do the heart. The heart is just a muscle which pumps blood around, right? So,
Or it has to be something.
okay. Yes, actually, you're being metaphysical.
Yeah.
I'm saying Western culture. I'm saying not modern Western culture. I don't. Modern Western culture associates feelings with the brain. The heart is just a muscle, right? Okay, but I'm saying I mean Western ancient culture, right? In Jewish culture, the kidneys are associated with thought, with advice. Now, is there anything to that? I've no idea. Right, but that's how it's seen. So you can have kidneys. Test my kidneys. Right. That doesn't need to see how much urine there is on the kidneys or salt in the kidneys. It doesn't mean that. It means, am I giving good advice? Right. My heart means to test my heart means am I totally devoted to God's service? And again, it's not really in the heart. Can't just think over here that pumps blood around you. But that's apparently how it seems. So that's how they talk in Hebrew texts about the kidneys giving advice and being tested and being. That's what it means. And soref. What's a soref? A soref is a silversmith. Right. And what he does is he's taking. I presume the reason why it's called soref. We use it to mean. To make gold jewellery or silver jewellery and that sort of stuff. But I think the word soref really means to take the silver ore, which is the way it comes from the ground, and make pure silver from it. And after you've done that, then you make jewellery from it. Okay? So that's what it's saying, do the same thing, to purify. Purify, that's the word soref, my kidneys and my heart.
Wait, what does the heart symbolize in Jewish culture?
Excitement, love, probably the same thing. We're talking about Leiv tahor, give me a pure heart. It means something which is devoted to. I'm not saying it's different to Western culture. I'm just saying I don't think Western culture has anything to do with the kidneys. I don't think it sees them as anything just a thing that cleans out your blood and whatever it is. Okay, all right. So, okay, now, So, the several of the Psalms, one of the Psalms is explicit about David's relationship with Bathsheba. When I mean explicit, I don't mean explicit about the relationship, but it's explicit that it's referring to that. I think Psalm 51, if I'm not mistaken, from yesterday. Even says the way. It says, here, Lam Natseach Mizmah David. This is whatever the Natseach means, okay, a psalm to David. B'vay Elav Nasan HaNavi, when Nasan the prophet came to him, Ka'asher ba el Bathsheba, when he came to Bathsheba. So the Tehillim is clear that this thing is dedicated to this event. But there are others Tehillim which are clearly, probably the whole feeling of all of Tehillim is about, I've done things wrong and God to help me and cleanse me, and it's all indirectly related to David's tshuva process that was developed in a big way through the story. But this, according to Chazal, is the introduction to the story. When David says, God test me, David asked God to test him. So I'll say, why did David ask me to test? Isn't that a wrong thing to do? You're not supposed to ask God to test you. Well, yes, you and I know that because we lived after the story. You see, but David didn't know that because he had to learn the hard way. And he had no one to teach him.
But so didn't even Shlomo do it?
Shlomo was tested?
Did he ask for a test?
No. Not that I know of. No. Shlomo thought it's okay to take all these wives thinking that nothing would happen. He didn't ask God for a test. But according to this Tehillim 26, you see David says, God test me. And Chazal fill in the background of this request to be tested, that David said to God. Now, does that mean he actually spoke to him or he thought about this idea? I don't know. But the way Chazal write it is David spoke to God and he said, why do Jews, when they pray, say the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, and they don't say the God of David? I think that judging my success and my efforts and what I've done in my life, I think that I don't deserve any less. I mean, he's not big-headed, right? Because that would go and say, yeah, you're big-headed, right? Obviously, that he's not. He's seriously saying this. The reason why we talk about the God of Abraham is because Abraham bequeathed to the Jewish people a relationship with God which is unique to Abraham, which is a God of kindness, chesed, right? And Yitzchak taught the world that there's a God of strict justice, where everything has to be just right, which is Yitzchak, right? And Yaakov taught the God of some synthesis between the two, Tiferes, whatever you want to do, right? Okay, you can whatever we approach, but that each of them is different. David said, and I'm given, I don't know, Malchus, to the Jewish way of looking at the world, and therefore you should say, okay, David, that was David's argument. And God said, I tested them, I didn't test you. Okay, so you could talk a whole thing. Abraham is clearly being tested. And how was Jacob tested? And how was Isaac tested? Look, we're all tested, right? You and I are tested too, but it doesn't mean that, right? There's no point in being in this world if you're not going to be tested. Right? We're not robots. It doesn't mean that. It means a serious test, which is not just, do you get up for Shacharis, right? It's a test which is
like walking on the roof and seeing a pretty lady. And
maybe we'll get to that in a second, right? But I'm saying how Abraham was tested, right? Yeah, right. So it would seem that to be tested means for example, nobody counts Abraham's inviting there's a bit of debate what Abraham's 10 tests were. Right? There's one that we know for sure. It says, and God tested Abraham and told him to take his son to slaughter. Right? All the others, it doesn't say. We have to work it out from the text. Okay? So some are more obvious, some are less obvious. But none of the commentators think that Abraham inviting the guest into his house when he was in terrible pain from his circumcision that he did at the age of 100, and it was a very, very hot day. No one considers that test. And the reason is because it may be difficult. It's not a test. Because that was what Abraham's life was all about, inviting guests. Right? Most of Abraham's tests were contrary to his avodas Hashem, throwing Ishmael out of the house. Right? That's something that doesn't come easy to Abraham, because Abraham Avinu's whole life is about bringing people close to God and bring them into his house, and he's being told to throw him out, to throw his wife out of the house in Hagar, right? To go war against the 4 kings. So those are things which don't come easy, right? That's what a test is. To leave his old father behind in Haran and go to the land of Canaan. You understand? I think that's the idea. So, I don't know, you could go through Yitzchak and see how he was tested and how Yaakov was tested, and each of them is not really, this is not the purpose of this class to discuss the others. But the point is, that Hashem says to David, you weren't tested. David says, okay, so test me. That's what David is saying in Tehillim 26. B'chaneini v'naseini. I've done okay up till now. He says, right? Ani betumi alachti, Hashem batachti, lo yamad. I'm not going to stumble. Test me. You'll see, God. I'll pass your tests. God says, yeah, we'll see. You know what? I'm going to do you a special favor. I'm going to tell you what the test is going to be. They didn't even know. You're going to tell you what the test is, and we'll see if you pass. So, like I say, good scouts is prepared. So, if I know what the test is, I come prepared. Hashem said the test is going to be with illicit relationships with a married woman. That's going to be the test. Oh, a married woman, whatever, right? I said, okay, ready for the test. Big deal. Look, it's the reason why it's a test. You should realize this as well. Chazal said that David was born with the same mazel as Esav.
What?
Mazel. Mazel means horoscope, fortune, astrological sign. What that means is, right, we have a thing called nurture and nature.
Yeah.
David's nature, we have natures. That's another way of saying mazel just means what nature you have.
Yeah.
What comes natural to you. So some people, they're naturally good. Some people are naturally bad. Some people are naturally generous. Some people are naturally stingy. And other things they can learn, right?
So David and
Esav had the same mazel. What the mazel is called ma'adim. Ma'adim is the Hebrew for Mars. They were both born under the mazel of Mars, which means their natural tendency was to get very excited about things and to go and react and go and.
Could this be why they're both gingy? Or
Exactly. That's the first indication. They're both redheads.
But how do you know your
That's
own?
always the answer.
How do you know?
Your own mazal.
You can work it out. I once saw a letter that somebody asked the Lubavitcher Rebbe about trying to work out his own mazal, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe says it's more complicated than you think. Theoretically, you should be able to work it out. It should be according to when you're born, because the mazel changes every 2 hours. The mazel at the beginning of Sunday is sun. That's why it's called Sunday. The mazel at the beginning of Monday is the moon, which is why it's called Moon Day. And the mazel at the beginning of
Tuesday.
Tuesday. No, it's the name of another planet, which in French is Shiur, whatever. Right? It's Saturday, right? Is mazel at the beginning of Saturday is Saturn.
Where do we
But
learn?
that's a goyish thing.
It's not Goyish, it's Jewish thing. I mean, it's real. It's not Goyish and good, it's real. So God created the world. According to Chazal in the Gemara in Shabbos, what page is it? 156?
119 or 121a.
Okay. It's a Gemara in Shabbos about the different mazolos that are influential at the time of birth. Each one changes every 2 hours. And because it changes every 2 hours, I think it's every 2 hours. No, it's every hour. Every 2 hours is a different one. That's the zodiac, something else. Right? The zodiac takes 2 hours. That's like the zodiac which changes every month. This is everything every hour, and every hour of the day it changes, and every day of the week it changes. But if every hour, there's 7 of them, right? And if every hour it changes, then I think that's a whole number. At the beginning of the week, it comes back to another one. What's another one? Vendredi. Who speaks French? Well, what's vendredi? Which day of the week?
Wednesday.
Friday. Which is the planet that is the beginning? Venus. Very good. So called vendredi means Venus day, right? And then what other days do you have? Well, how do you say Thursday? Jeudi or something like that? No. That's how you say it? I don't know which the planet that is.
Jupiter.
Jupiter, very good, Jupiter. Right.
You're
Okay.
right, you're
And then
right.
you've got Wednesday. How do you say Wednesday? Mercury, which is? Mercury. Right?
What was Tuesday?
What?
What was Tuesday?
What's Tuesday? How do you say Tuesday in French? Mardi, which is? Mars.
I thought Mars was.
Mars is what?
French, yeah. No, I had to take 12 years of French education.
Oh, we're not talking about months. We're not talking about the zodiac. We're not talking about the influence of the zodiac. It's a different calculation altogether. We're talking about the influence of the time of the day and which day of the week you were born.
Wait, so I was
if you're born under the influence of Mars, means no, it doesn't mean you were born at the beginning of Tuesday. I'm saying it changes every hour. But the one that is at the beginning of Tuesday is Mars. So you could be born at the beginning of Tuesday, or 7 hours later, it'll also be Mars. Understand? Because each 7 hours it goes back to the cycle. Okay. The question is, about we're discussing what hours do we mean? Do we mean hours of 60 minutes? Does it depend on the length of the
When
day?
does it start?
Starts at the beginning of Sunday. What does the beginning mean? Does the beginning mean sunrise? Does it mean? It probably means sunrise because it's a question of the sun, so it probably depends on the sun. I don't know. Anyway, how you work it out is your problem. But the point is, some people are born naturally good. So Chazal say that Shaul HaMelech was born naturally good, right? And that's why when he fails, it's seriously held against him, much more than King David. Shaul HaMelech was born on the mazel of Tzadkan. Tzadkan is the Hebrew name for Jupiter. Okay, you probably never heard of it, even Israelis here probably never heard of it, but that's how you say it. Yeah, you know, only use Jupiter, right? Okay, because Israelis want to sound very Western, so they use but the real name in Hebrew, classical Hebrew for Jupiter is Tzadkan. And for Saturn is Shabtai. Now, believe that or not, Shabtai is the same as Shabbos.
Oh.
Shabbos. No, he gets his name from that, right? But it's Shabbos, which is the same as Saturday.
Right.
Shabbos, Saturday, Shabtai, Saturn. Saturn's day. Get it? Wow, that's not just coincidence. Anyway, so that's the Hebrew name for Saturn. And Venus is Noga, and Mercury is Chama, Kochav Chama, which means the sun's star, because it's the planet that's closest to the sun. And then, of course, you have Mars is Ma'adim. Okay? Now, according to Chazal, David and Shaul and Asaph were both born, indicated by their both being redheads. It's clear in the Apostle both of them were redheads. Okay? And the natural tendency is to be a warrior, to fight, to kill, blood. Not necessarily negative. It could be negative, right? If you kill innocent people, if you go and fight Nazis, right? That's not negative, that's good. But it's still the same. Some people are pacifists. They don't like to kill, right? Some people are squeamish. Some like doing operations and seeing all that blood. But they're actually helping people. So the tendency to enjoy being around blood isn't necessarily negative, but it's a tendency that people have. Right? The same thing is a womanizer. Now, you'd think that's always bad. Yes, if it's somebody else's wife, right? But not if it's your own wife. That's great. That means you have a great relationship and it's all exciting. You understand? Right? So it doesn't have to be bad. Okay? And that's why both Asaph and David, right, have that aspect of their lives too. You understand? David is, what is he, chasing women? But not in a negative sense. You understand? Yeah, you think it's negative, but he's a king, so why shouldn't he have 18 wives? No, it's not a big deal. You know, you would say, well, this is a big tzaddik, right? Yeah, but he's just channeling his fiery neshama in a mutter, in a permitted direction. If it's going to squash that, it's not going to help. That's his nature. You've got to do it in a way which is okay. Get it? I think that's the idea. So God's testing him with that. I know you, David. I know what tendencies you have, right? Not you, right? And therefore, I'm going to test you with that. Okay, so that's another very important fact. You say, oh, what's King David isn't a big tzaddik? Yes, but you don't have David's temptations because you're a big tzaddik and you're naturally cool and you know, women don't turn you on, right? So therefore you don't have this insane. If you were David Yetzirah, you'd know what it was like. So as we said yesterday, it wasn't technically an Aish either, but he's being tested. Okay? So David knows he's being tested. So that, by the way, explains, isn't this beautiful Chazal? The same Gemara in Kuf Zayin with Aleph says, David said, well, if I'm going to be tested with my sexual pull, isn't the best thing? What would you think is the best thing to do? Again, it's hard for us to judge because we are living after the story. So we learned all these things from David.
Go on the roof where you
No. What are you going to have relationship with your wives during the day, because then at night there's no women around at night. The temptation is when you're a king, you go around the country, you got to see people. So during the day you see people. At night you're at home. In any case, it's all dark. It's not like today you can see things at night. Those days it was pitch black at night. You understand? So you go to bed. So what does he do? It's a solution. Instead of having sexual relation with my wives at night, I'll have during the day, and that way I'll have less temptation, right? That's why the beginning of the story starts off, that David wakes up from his afternoon shlof. Why is that? First of all, why does David shlof in the afternoon? And why does, it doesn't say sleep, it says from his bed, right? And why is that important part of the story? Who cares that he went to bed in the afternoon? The answer is, he thought that that's going to make it better, right? But Chazal say he forgot something. There are some things which the more you use them, the more they need to be used, the stronger it gets. And it's not going to, very like shortly afterwards maybe, right, it's going to help, but half an hour later, right, he's back to his temptation. Right? Okay. That's a very important point of the story. Now, Rabbi Dessler has a whole article in this, I think in Michtav Elio. He's got a whole chapter called "The Sins of the Rishonim," meaning our earlier great people. And he says like this: the reason why we have a tradition not to ask for God to test us is because we have to know. No, we should know that with our own strengths, we wouldn't pass the test that God's given us. The only reason why we're able to pass them in the first place is God dedicates himself to helping you. If God would leave you to your own natural tendencies, you wouldn't pass. And that's why we don't ask. Because look, I like to compare it to a guy who's blind and has to cross the main road. Okay? So you can't do it on your own. You have to ask for help. So not knowing whether you're going to get help means you'll only do it if you really have to do it. If you have to do it, then you'll do it. But you don't. No. So, and then hopefully you'll get help to cross the road, and if not, you'll go back home, right? You don't go out unless you have to go out. You have to go to the bank, you go out to the bank. You don't go out for fun. Oh, maybe someone will cross me the road. So if you know that with any test you have, you're going to need God's help. You don't have to be tested. Maybe God will decide not to help you, right? And what's even stronger is this whole concept, I believe, was not known until this story. It's the reason why David failed is because he asked to be tested, and God said, "You want to be tested? I'm not going to help you." And you know why God doesn't help you? Because if he does, it will only strengthen your mistake. How does David start this psalm? I have walked in perfectness, wholesomeness. In you I trusted. I will not slip. Why do you think you're not going to slip? Because you haven't slipped up till now. Don't you realize the reason why you haven't slipped up till now? Because I've been helping you all this time. So if David is now given help to pass this test, it's just going to, what's the word? To reinforce his mistake. You see, God, I passed this again. So God's got to show him his mistake in thinking he's loose on his own. Okay, I'll see if you can do it on your own. And then he failed. So it's not fair for us to judge him because we don't ask to be tested. So even when we are tested, we're given the ability to pass it. Because God wants you to pass, he'll give you, he doesn't test you if it's silly to test you so that you can't pass. So God's giving you the strength. I got the invitation, thank you very much.
Can't wait to see you there.
Yeah, God's given that. God tests us on things that we can pass, and he's given us the strength to pass, knowing that he can help us. But David wasn't helped, and that's the reason why he failed. Okay, that's a very, very important that third point to consider. The next point is, so how did God do it? Why was she bathing there? So the same Gemara says, why was she bathing on the roof where everyone could see? You know what Chazal says, a beautiful addition to the story. David went under his roof, and he saw this bird. Not that sort of bird, right? He saw a bird, right? Flying, a big bird, right? Just, wow, look at this. He takes out his his bow and arrow, and he starts to do shooting practice.
In the middle of the city.
But who this bird? No, nothing yet. This bird was actually
What a man.
God. Yes, it was actually the Satan who was God's vehicle for testing him. As soon as he shot the bird, the bird flew in front of the area where she was showering behind the curtain, and the arrow went through it, smashed the curtain, and there he sees this woman naked. Now, that doesn't mean he should fail. That's just how the story. I'm answering why was she bathing in a way that David could see. The answer, she wasn't. She was nicely protected with a nice protection, and David smashed the protective wall, or whether it was a curtain or a shower wall, with the arrow, and that's the way this came.
Yeah, and then the arrow's going to fly through her, and she's going to scream and hide behind something.
Yeah,
Okay, it could be. But David saw immediately, before she had a chance to run away. It takes seconds to react, right? Wow,
I don't understand.
And then,
So he saw. What was the test? So he saw.
Rega. He saw that, and he said, "Oh, that's nice. That's very pretty. I want that." Right? And as we said, David was a hot-headed, hot-blooded young man, right? And this is his temptation. So he said, "Now we're not finished the story. Okay. Okay.
How does he know?
All right. What?
Okay.
The question. The next thing we have to answer. I think that. I know there's more in the Gemara. That same Gemara says another point. It says as follows. It says that this woman was destined for King David since the creation.
Whoa.
Now, the significance of that statement probably means, look, everything's destined since creation, so what's the chiddush, right? What's new about this? I think what it's trying to say is a point that Dylan had right from the beginning, is that David got his life from Adam HaRishon. His 70 years were bequeathed to him by a special present. He was meant to die in birth. He got them from Adam HaRishon. Adam HaRishon's messed up big time. Okay? The years that were given to David were meant to rectify Adam HaRishon's sin. So let's analyze what Adam HaRishon's sin is. According to commentaries in the Chazal, not eating from the Eitz HaDas, not to eat from the tree of knowledge, was only a temporary prohibition. And it was meant to wait until Shabbos, and then he would be given permission to eat it. Chazal say that David's wife, Sheva, was also designated to him at the same time, since the 6 days of creation. And he was meant to wait. Look, if Uriah died in battle, if God runs the world, that means Uriah was meant to die in that battle. It's true that David had him put to the front, but you think you can affect him? In all likelihood, I can't prove this, but in all likelihood, it was time for Uriah to die. And if David had just waited until Uriah got killed in battle, then he would have taken, and that would have been fine. But he didn't wait. So this was really meant to rectify Adam HaRishon's sin, waiting for this thing, but instead, he didn't wait. But now you understand the temptation. It wasn't just that he messed up. The temptation in this woman wasn't purely physical. I'm not suggesting it wasn't physical. No, it says she was very good looking, right? But it wasn't just that. This was actually his soulmate. Now, none of you guys have met your soulmate yet. You have, right? You have. Okay?
Exactly.
Now, so, right? So one day, or maybe already, you'll feel that that's not just another girl you met. You met lots of girls. I know you have, right? But
birds.
right? Yeah.
Right.
But this has been waiting 3,500 years
Wow.
for this union. It's actually, you're meant to wait another few days, David. I don't know, until her husband died. But that's the pull. It's not just a physical pull. David's been pulled to this who really is not his other wives. Those were nice and pretty and great, had a relationship. But this was his bashet, as they call it, right? This was the other heart of his neshama. Now, I would guess, we believe that a guy, as originally the neshamas were together, and then they're split, and then when you get married, you get back together. This other half of your neshama, a guy who has more than one wife, was his neshama split into three? Or there's one of them who is the other half of the neshama, the other one not? Not every guy marries a bashet. Right? You hope you get yours. You pray you get yours. Sometimes, if you're very fussy, you get somebody else's bashet. And you have to deal with it. And then the marriage becomes rocky and you need shalom bias classes, whatever. But if you get the other half of your neshama, that's a neat fit. That fits perfectly. That's how it's supposed to be.
Shalom bias classes, everything's great.
Yeah, should be. If two things fit, but if two things are designed from the beginning to be together, why should there be problems? Right? Anyway, that's another sugya of how you can mess that up. That's when you're too fussy, you don't want this, want that. So okay, so somebody else. The story, someone came to the stapler. Rabbi Kanievsky, not Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky. Kanievsky's father is known as the stapler because he came from a town in Lithuania, Russia, called Horenstapel. He was known as the stapler because he was the guy who came from Horenstapel. Mm-hmm. And he was a big tzaddik. Somebody came to me and says, I've been looking and looking for my Shiur, right? And he never found my bashet. He said, sure you did. You met her and you threw her away. You didn't want her.
No way.
What? What? You think that God forces you to marry the girl who's your bashet? If you don't want to marry her, so you have choice, right?
What about the other way around?
In everything you have life, right? You can if you don't want her, so somebody else will get her. Somebody else whose bashet was more problematic for him, but this is what he got. So he merited to have yours.
What about the other way around? The girls are more tuned in.
Can they lose?
Can they be like?
I guess I don't know. I don't know how it works. I don't know. Here's a good question. But that's what he said. You could, if you for reasons which are unjustified, right? You know, you said, I'm going to marry Miss World. Anything less than Miss World, I'm not interested. Right? You mean like this? Why? I'm going to marry a woman who comes with whose dad is a billionaire, right? you know,
Wait,
or a woman whose father's Rosh Shiva, right? I mean, no, you guys are not going to appreciate that, but there are guys. We went to the yeshiva yesterday, right? With those 1,000 guys learning there. You could imagine one of those guys thinks that he's the best guy in yeshiva. He's only marrying Rosh Yeshiva's daughter, less than that, he's not interested. So that's like, understand? He laughed at that, right? When I said Miss World, he didn't laugh at that, right? You can appreciate someone being so fussy, right? Okay, so in the Haredi world, the guy says, look, I'm the best guy in yeshiva. Why shouldn't I marry Rosh Yeshiva's daughter? Why should I take less than that? Or just a Maggid Shiur's daughter? Rabbi this? No, I want Rosh Yeshiva's daughter. That's prestige, you understand?
Shouldn't be like
In that yeshiva, it probably comes with money too, but it definitely comes with prestige, right? So the Stipler is saying, if those are your considerations, then you can lose the girl who God created for you, right? That doesn't mean you have to marry a girl who looks like the back end of a bus. No, it doesn't mean that. Or a poor. You ever heard that expression? No, you never heard that? Okay. Or a pauper, or a girl who comes who's got. No, it doesn't have to be that, but it has to be reasonable. It has to be what you need, not what you want. Right? You have to work out what does my neshama need for a happy marriage, a marriage which is successful. Once that, then. But if you say no, I had a friend, right? I had a friend who said he wanted to know. He was asking me about this girl who happened to be a girl from my class as well. So I knew. So he said to me, she's very pretty, no question. Ask anybody. It's okay. This is recorded because my wife admits this, right? And he said, my wife said, he's crazy. This girl is gorgeous, and he's not sure if she's good enough. It's not like he's got very, very high standards of what he considers. Anyway, let's get off the point. The point is that, but when you have
Really
the girl is really the second half of a neshama. So I say a guy's got two wives. I imagine the one wife is. Yeah, it's very nice, but the other one is the one who's the real pull. Is the one who's, and this is what pulling David in this relationship. He doesn't know that this is what's pulling him in the relationship. He doesn't know this girl was meant for him since the world was created, right? To bring its completion, to fix the sin of Adam Arishan. But that's what's the pull. It's about. Listen to this. The last bit of the story is the best bit, right? This is a well-known medrash. Unfortunately, it's not written down. Meaning, it's not written in the classic midrashim. The classic midrashim were written around sometime between the site around Mishnaic times to Rashi's time. Oh, that whole period. Those midrashim were actually written, so we have the books that we can read them inside. The first midrash that was written down was a midrash called Pirkei Rabbi Leader, right? Like the Mishnayos were all off by heart, and the Gemara was all off by heart till someone actually decided it has to be written down. The same was true with the midrash. It was all off by heart till someone wrote it down, right? So this seems to be medrash. It was never written down, or it was written down. A lot of books have been burnt. The Christians, the Catholics, love to burn Jewish books. So a lot of books that even were around at the time of Rashi, we don't have anymore, right? So they don't exist anywhere in the world. So we have books that are referred to, and clearly they existed at the time. The Rambam writes that he wrote a commentary on the Yerushalmi, Talmud Yerushalmi. We don't have it. Never been found. It could maybe exist in some Cairo Geniza or something like that. You know, we don't have it. There are lots and lots and lots of books that we don't have because they were burnt on public burnings. Anyway, we don't know. This medrash is not being found. The earliest source that's been written down is from the 15th century. Then it's really because that's when printing books were printed instead of handwritten. So once it was quoted by one, it was very easy to make 1 million copies of it, and that's why once it's been written at that time in history, these things are not lost because there were so many copies made of it. The early ones were lost. Anyway, part of the story is written in a commentary which is older than Rashi even. I read this thing, I just looked up at Google somewhere. Commentary by a student of Reb Sajagor who lived in Bavel, and he writes part of the story, but not the whole story. The story goes like this. Uriah HaChitti, who was Bathsheba's husband, has a very strange name. Chitti is Hittite, which sounds like that he was a Canaanite. The Canaanites have lots of different tribes. It looks like he was a Canaanite, right? You can't prove it from that name, but it certainly sounds like, right, that's what it means. Okay, now, why would a Canaanite be one of David's generals? Okay, he was a mercenary. He joined the ranks. Could be. Why would Eliam, who was one of David's generals, marry his daughter to this Canaanite? She couldn't get anyone better than that. I mean, she's a very great woman, this Bathsheba. She eventually becomes the mother of Shaul HaMelech, right? She done with, right? All she could find was this Canaanite. Okay, it's not such a big question, right? But it's a point worth considering, right? So, this medrash says that Uriah HaChitti was none other than can't believe this, the armor bearer of Goliath. Goliath, this big 12-foot giant who King David, right?
Whoa.
Okay? He had an armor bearer. I mean, someone who carries your shield, right? Not these little shields like the Maccabeans had, right? A big, like, Roman shield,
Three-sided
right?
shield.
Three-sided shield, right? Which you walk in, and he's this big guy, so he doesn't carry that. He gets someone to carry that. It's placed on the ground, and he'll sort of stand behind it or whatever.
Bless you.
Okay? Okay. So what? So what? So apparently the story goes like this. When King David killed him, he wasn't dead yet, Goliath. Because it says in the story he killed him, and then it says he finished him off with his sword. Right? The word he uses is memotet. Memotet, mem vav tough, means to finish someone off who's almost dead. Why was the stone? The stone wasn't enough. The stone just felled him and fell to the ground, right? Maybe unconscious. And David couldn't get the sword out of the sheath to chop off Goliath's head. It was like, he didn't know the code, right, to get it out. Combination lock. I don't know. David couldn't get it out. Maybe it was just too heavy. I don't know. He just couldn't get it out. So the armor bearer said, David said to him, will you help me? He said, enemy. He said, I'll help you. Here's what I remember the exact how it goes. I'll help you.
Let me join.
Just something like that. So that if something about converting, he'll convert. He'll help him. Go. He wants to convert, and he'll help him. Then he says, "Who's going to marry me if I convert?" So he said, "No problem. I'll find you a good shidduch." No, he says, "I'll find you a good shidduch if you convert and help me to chop off his head." So okay, so he agreed. Shook hands. He agreed. Pulled out the sword. He chopped off his head, and then he died. Okay, so David's now got to keep his promise. So the way I heard the story was, then God, so to speak, doesn't like this idea. Meaning, like, who do you think's going to marry this guy? You think that you have you take some Jewish girl and introduce this guy? This is like a guy with serious background problems. He's got serious problems. This guy's a Canaanite bodyguard or armor bearer of Goliath, right? From a rough background, and you're just going to take some nice Beis Yaakov girl and think Beis Yaakov girls are just like that? You just like go for anyone? She's gonna make a fuss, right?
Yeah, King David's recommendation.
Oh, right. Wait a second. But so he says, yeah, so King David thinks, yeah, he'll manage. So he becomes a shadchan, he finds a nice sweet girl, and of course, who is it? Bathsheba. So who actually, right? See, this is all God's sense of humor. Understand?
Yeah,
God says, you're going to just pick a girl. You know who you're going to pick? You're going to pick the girl who's meant to be your bride, who's the one who you're supposed to complete the sin of Adam Arishon with, and you're going to give it to Uriah instead. And that last part of the puzzle explains why when David sees her from a distance, he doesn't know who it is because he gets too far, right? But then he sends someone to find out who it is, and what do they come back and say?
Like,
oh, this is Bathsheba. Oh, really? Right? I mean, isn't this Bathsheba? They're saying, like, well, of course, David knows who Bathsheba is. God is the one who introduced them. God is the one who's the shadchan.
But you didn't feel that
The pool.
Well, it wasn't that time, was it? It wasn't time. This was years before when she was a little girl,
Oh.
right? And now he introduced his own Bashet
To the
to
great.
Uriah, who married her. Okay, those are all the points that Chazal talk at, I think, which put the whole story in a bit of a different light, right? The first point is that David has to be tested. Therefore, his divine inspirational help was taken away. Second of all, David's natural tendency was his nature, right? Was both into blood and into women, like Asaph was, right? So David had to channel those strengths in a positive way. Okay. The next point is that the Medrash says that he wanted to be tested, and therefore he got this test without his strength. The next point is that she wasn't actually married because she was divorced, and the last point is it wasn't really murder because he was terribly insubordinate, and therefore David really had the right to kill him even without sending him to the front. Okay, the last thing that is answered. Nope, we've got all the points, I think, into the thing. Again, it doesn't make it was okay for what David did. It just means it wasn't as serious, and that's why I think what was really held against him was the fact that the whole story he was trying to hide. He tried to cover it up. He tried to cover it up in a way which was convenient for him. This is what we said. That means there were different ways he could have covered it up. Just left it and hoped that no one would find out, or he could have not covered it up and come open about it, and then maybe that would have made a Chil Hashem, maybe it would have made a Kiddush Hashem. But he did it in a way that was the most convenient, which was to marry her. And that's why the prophet comes along and says that he's going to be punished for it, but it's not as bad as we think. So, the one last thing is that after he dies, it says that her husband, she mourns the death of her husband.
Wait, he is.
And then Master.
Right. After Uriah is killed in battle, his wife mourns the death of her husband. But it changes from husband to husband, from the word Isha, meaning her man, to Ba'ala, which means her owner. Okay? And we weren't sure what's the nuance in that change. So you said correctly, I think, the Isha implies something more personal, as opposed to a less impersonal relationship. Okay? So it could be like this. It's trying to say that from the world's perspective, what they saw, this was a nice, loving relationship, and there was actually a personal relationship. Right? In actual fact, it wasn't like that because she was actually divorced, technically. Now, he was still hoping to come back to her. There was like an agreement that when I come back, you will remarry me. So they had that Ba'ala sense, right? But it wasn't really Isha. So it says, when it says she heard that her husband died, it used the word Isha because that's from the public perspective, when she was told. When it talks about that she mourned him, right? She didn't mourn Isha because it wasn't really Isha because he had divorced her. But she was still had some relationship to him. This was the man who she had intended to come back to. Even after the story of David, she intended to come back to him, and it's only because he was killed in battle that she didn't have anymore. So that the Malbim says that already also hints this change of word from Isha to Ba'ala, implying there really are two states that you could consider. You could consider a real relationship, a technical relationship, and they didn't have the technical relationship, even they still had some type of relationship between them. Okay? All right, so now we're going to go further and go through all the stages of the punishment that are meted out to David. Some of them it's clear that they're measure for measure. Some of them it's a bit harder to see, but that's okay?
Let's do it.
All right. Any more questions on the story? Now, you also have to appreciate that even if, as I said before, even if we would see the story literally, and it's still, the gates of Tshuva are always open, and that's exactly what David did. And that's what David taught us. However bad we've messed up, we can do Teshuvah, which is what David did. Before he did Tshuva, he was told he would die. As soon as he started his Tshuva process, which was by recognizing that he made a mistake, and that was the first stage. Okay, so David says, all right, that's already the beginning, and we can start taking things from there.
In general, the test in Shlomo, wasn't Shlomo that got tested against like a demon and got thrown across the world or something?
Well, that was a test. I mean, that happened, yeah. Again, test, in my understanding, means contrary to your natural, what you want to do.
Your natural pool.
Yeah. So when you have you really want to do the opposite, and you do this, that's a test.
Does this mean
what comes easy, right? What you're born with, you're expected to do that. But that's not such a big deal. It's what comes difficult. Let's do an example. What's Yaakov's test? What's Yaakov's big test?
angel? No.
Angel? Could be. That was a fight. It was a test. I mean, could he just say, I'm not going to fight the angel, I'm going to go home and chill? He didn't have much choice, did he? Because the angel met him in the middle of the...
What made it still like seeing his brother was the thing that he was most scared of?
Lavan, something with Lavan.
Scared. I would say, well, let's see what is Yaakov's life all about.
It was deceiving his father with the fur.
Very good. Why do you think that's called the test?
Because it wasn't. He was He was such a kind, like loving, honest
Better,
guy.
honest. Yaakov's midah is emes. Yaakov's grew up in the tents of Torah. Right? Yaakov is the passage Titain emes Yaakov. Yaakov is a man of truth. Yaakov's shocked at the thought of cheating his father out of those blessings, or of cheating Lavan out of his sheep. Those are all things that Esav would love to do, right? Esav is a cheat. He's a liar. Yaakov is ishtam. What does ishtam mean?
Pure, like
Ishtam means straightforward. The opposite of Esav. Esav is conniving, plotting, planning. How can I get? Yaakov's straightforward. He says what he means. He means what he says. That's what Yaakov ishtam. And now he's got to lie to get the brachos. That's a test. That's I don't know. Chazal don't say what Yaakov's test was.
They
don't explain this. Again, the Medrash says that the Avos were tested. We're all tested, but they're big tests that give them, yeah. So it says it by Avram. It doesn't say what Yaakov. They don't say what Yaakov's test was. What was Yitzchak's test?
Being slaughtered. Yeah.
What?
Yes.
Well, did Yitzchak have a choice?
Well.
That's what I'm saying. Who said Yitzchak? You could say it being slaughtered, but I don't know. We don't know in the story. Yitzchak went willingly, didn't go willingly. Did Avram even tell him? You know what I mean? Also, you know what Yitzchak's midah was? What was Yitzchak's midah?
Work.
Gevura.
Yeah.
So if it's Gevura, so then being a korban isn't a big test. That's exactly what life's all about. It's sacrifice everything to God. That's exactly what he was. That's not a test. So you could say he only became that after the test. That's what some say. No, I think the Yitzchak was born. Avraham Avinu was a man of rachmim, so slaughtering his son is a test, right? Because he loves. That's it. But Yitzchak, who's all about doing the right thing and being a servant of God and doing, always being intentional, always ready to do what's right. Oh, when God says you sacrifice your life, of course, that's what a good soldier does. That's what heaven does. That's not a test. You know what I think Yitzchak's test was? This is my take. I don't see anyone discussing this. I think Yitzchak's test was when he was challenged about the wells. You remember the story? Yitzchak dug wells, and the others came and took it off him. So a person like Yitzchak would say, get out of here, what a chutzpah, these are my wells, I dug them, I put... That's what, a man like Yitzchak should have done that. Right. He said, no, it's fine, I'll go and dig another one. So that's the sort of thing you expect Avraham Avinu to do. To be nice and gentle and happy and no problem, take whatever you want. Yitzchak, who naturally would have said, but the law is on my side. Get out of here. You have no right. I'll take you to law. I'll take you to court, and we'll sort it out. I'll see you in court, right? Yeah. No, Yitzchak's fine. We'll do another well. Yitzchak kept on moving on until they left him alone. That's my take. Why not? I don't know. But that's my understanding of what Yitzchak's test was. Should we carry on the story? How much do we have? Oh, we've gone over time. Okay, so we'll carry on. Next. No, we have to start a new text. We can't.